NAC News.
I'm Trevor Madison.
I'm Maggie Grishow.
And this is 8-Man 2017 Bracketology.
Worth County, with a record of 9-0, faces off with East Atchison, a record of 7-3 this Friday night.
Worth County has scored the most points per game this year in 8-man football, and they've also given up the fewest. They're led offensively by Tevin Cameron, who leads the state in touchdowns scored with 31, and is also second in yards rushing with 1,351. However, East Atchison is also led in the air by Jake McErney. He has 928 passing yards on the season with 15 touchdowns. But we think the Worth County's offense is going to be too much for East Atchison's defense. Worth County is going to take the game.
Next, number 3 ranked Rockport, with a record of 9-0, takes on number 4 ranked Stanbury with a record of 9-1.
This is probably the most interesting and important first-round game because it puts two top 5 ranked team against each other with Rockport and Stanbury. Stanbury's only loss came to Worth County, the number 1 ranked team in the state. Rockport is going to be led by Jace Hughes in the air that already has 1,120 yards passing, and also with Caden Linthcomb and Ray Dewhurst are 4th and 5th respectively in receiving yards this year. Stanbury is going to be led primarily on the ground by Trey Schieber, who's second in all of 8-man football with rushing yards, only behind Tevin Cameron from Worth County with 1,469 yards and 26 touchdowns. It's hard to compare the teams because the GRC usually has a higher level of competition than the 275, but Rockport has shown their true colors in saying that they've been very strong throughout the season in defeating Mountain City along with other important opponents. But in the play-in game last Friday, Stanbury did have trouble defeating Albany, and it was tied after the first quarter and was still a decent game at halftime. North County really has not been that strong of a football team this season, so we're going to pick Rockport to win this one.
The next match is number 5 ranked Mountain City with a record of 8-1 versus St. Joe Christian with a record of 4-5.
Moving into the next district now, again, Mountain City versus St. Joe Christian. Mountain City's only loss has been to a tough Rockport team in a 2-point loss and really a very heartbreaking game for Mountain City. They had the ball and a chance to score, but then threw an interception, and that really did them in. But St. Joe Christian had lost the first 3 games of the season and has really bounced back and has performed much better as the season has gone on. And they've won 4 out of the last 6, and one of the losses was to Worth County, probably the top team in 8-man football at this time. Mountain City is 5th in state scoring with 54.4 points per game. St. Joe Christian only scores 45.6 points per game. Mountain City is also 5th in points conceded with 18.4, but St. Joe Christian gives up quite a bit more. Their defense isn't quite as strong. They give up 37.6 points per game. St. Joe Christian is led primarily by passing with Ben Craven, but more importantly, they're led by rushing with Braden George, who is already over 1,000 yards this season. He has 1,344 yards and has also logged 26 touchdowns, one of the state leaders in rushing. Mountain City is led by Dylan Mars passing, has 886 yards and 18 touchdowns, but is also not always the most reliable with 5 interceptions. They're also led receiving by Matthew Papa, who's in the top 5 in receiving yards. He's 586 yards and 13 touchdowns. But really, as we look at the season from start to finish, St. Joe Christian, even though they started out pretty weak, they're really just peaking right at the time that they need to be since we're heading into districts. In Mountain City, since they lost against Rockport, ever since then their scores have been below performance level and they're starting to lose confidence. So we picked St. Joe Christian to move on in this one.
Next is our home team, North Andrew, ranked number 8 with a record of 5-3 versus South Holt Nottoway Holt with a record of 5-5.
It's important to remember that North Andrew's only losses have came to Sacred Heart, Worth County, and Stanbury, all who are in the top 5 ranked teams in the state. While South Holt Nottoway Holt has had some pretty poor losses coming in at 5-5. They've lost to each Atchison and Stewartsville, whose records have really not been the best so far this season. North Andrew is predominantly led in their passing game with Jacob Powelson, who has already passed for 2,000 230 yards on the season, on track to be a school record, and also leads the state by a huge margin. He's also passed for 31 touchdowns. And then his main target is Caleb Patterson, who leads the state with 1,217 yards and 17 touchdowns. Their passing game is really their strong suit, and it's really hard for any team to debunk that. No team really has so far, other than Worth County on the season. South Holt Nottoway Hole is predominantly led in rushing by Wes Williams. He already has over 1,000 yards this season with 1,081 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. But North Andrew has given up 1,080 rushing yards as a team, and that is definitely the team's weakness. North Andrew has struggled very mightily to stop the run. But as the season has gone on, North Andrew has somewhat improved, and South Holt Nottoway Hole really has not. They may have even gone a little bit backwards as the season has gone on. So we're going to pick North Andrew to win this one.
Our next matchup is number 7 ranked King City with a record of 6-2 versus Braemar with a record of 2-8.
These are really completely different teams. King City's only 2 losses have been against Worth County and Stanbury. Again, the 2 of the top 5 rated teams. Braemar only has 2 wins on the season, and really it was a bit of a surprise, more of an upset last week whenever they beat Stewartsville by quite a large margin. So they're really feeling good about themselves. But Braemar's only other win came from North Shelby, and it's important to remember that North Shelby and Stewartsville both had losing records on the season. King City's passing is very strong. Colin Breckenridge quarterbacks the team. He's second in the state with 1,442 passing yards and 24 touchdowns, and he's incredibly reliable with only 2 interceptions. King City also has a pretty strong rushing game with Jacob Moan. He's almost at 1,000 yards. He's rushed for 959 yards and has 17 touchdowns already. None of Braemar's stats made any of the leaderboards, and as a reason, predominantly looking at records and stats, we pick King City to win that one.
The next matchup is Southwest Livingston with a record of 5-4 versus Pattonsburg with a record of 5-5.
These are 2 very similar teams. It's kind of hard to compare them. They've really had their ups and downs on the season. Southwest Livingston had some really bad losses. They had some big wins also over Norborne, Hardin Central. Then some of their bad losses were earlier in the season against South Holt Nottoway Holt and East Atchison. Pattonsburg, all their losses came against teams with winning records, but they don't really have any major wins that really make them look all that better on paper. Southwest Livingston's a large part of their offense is passing with Cody Eddins. He has 980 yards and 13 touchdowns. Pattonsburg is mostly led on their rushing game with Cole Dilley. He has 1,043 yards and 17 touchdowns. Southwest Livingston, to supplement their passing game, they have the leading receiver, Mac Anderson, for their team. He has 557 yards and only 8 touchdowns. Southwest Livingston, the strength of their team is their defense, though. They're led by Drew Braden, who is second in state sacks with 15, and also Justin Stewart, who already has 109 tackles on the season. But a website that we're going to look at to help predict most of our games is called CalPreps, that looks at the statistical data and results to give expected margins of victory. And they favored Pattonsburg by 12 points. So we're going to say that Pattonsburg wins in a pretty close game.
Next up is number ranked 2 Sacred Heart with a record of 8-0 versus Norborne/Hardin Central, a record of 7-3.
Again, this is another probably a very high quality second round game. It's really pretty shocking that Norborne Hardin Central isn't on the top 10 state leaderboards. In my opinion, they should be ranked probably around 7-ish. Sacred Heart did beat Norborne Hardin Central earlier in the year by a landslide, 62-14, and the game was at Norborne Hardin Central. This game is going to be at Sacred Heart, so that's going to add to Sacred Heart's chances to win. Sacred Heart is second in the state in points scored with 63.5, and only gives up 17 points per game, which is really astounding, especially in 8-man football when scores skyrocket. Norborne Hardin Central is led by Zach Pearson. He does lead all of 8-man football in rushing yards with 1,531 and 18 touchdowns. And Norborne Hardin Central is also led by Hunter Higgins, and he leads the state defensively with 115 tackles. But really, on paper, this really isn't much of a match. Sacred Heart has played much tougher opponent and is fire-tested. We picked them to win this.
Next matchup is number 6 ranked Greenfield with a record of 7-1 versus Osceola with a record of 4-6.
In these these two teams' record really speak for themselves. As far as Greenfield has had a really good season with a 7-1 record, and Osceola has been about average with a 4-6. They're just about 500. They played earlier in the year, and as their record showed, Greenfield won in a landslide by a score of 52-20. And Greenfield was ranked third in the state in points conceded with only 14.4 points per game, which is really quite a milestone in 8-man football. Greenfield is led in the air by Bailey Baker, who's third in the state in passing, has 1,267 yards and 28 touchdowns, and also he's incredibly reliable with only 3 interceptions. Greenfield's defense is led by Quinn Mora with 103 tackles. Osceola has no players that made the leaderboard, so just predominantly looking at stats and records, we predict that Greenfield will win this one in a halftime game.
Now on to round 3 with the district championships. We have number 1 Worth County with a record of 9-0 versus number 3 Rockport with a record of 9-0.
This is a match of 2 unbeaten teams, and it can be argued that this will probably be the most important game for the district championships. Rockport only allows 12 points per game, while Worth County allows only 10.4, the two top teams in defense. And then they're both in the top 5 of scoring. Worth County leads with 65.5 points scored, while Rockport scores 61.6. This is going to be a clash of styles. Worth County really likes to run the ball and really doesn't have much of a passing game, and Rockport is just about the opposite. They love to pass but really have a hard time running. Both are also leaders in offensive yards. Both offenses are really incredible. Rockport's defense is led by Ray Dewhurst, that already has 12.5 sacks. And Worth County's defense secondary has been a little bit sketchy as the season's gone on. They've had a lot of trouble stopping the passing game. Rockport has even more trouble with their defensive line. And they've just really had a lot of trouble stopping the run as the season has gone on. CalPreps favors Worth County to win by 30 points, and I think that's a little bit extreme, but Worth County has really been battle-tested since they've been in the GRC, and Rockport really has not, as they've been in the 275. So we expect Worth County not to win by 30 points, but to win by a pretty significant margin.
Next up, again, is our home team, number 8, ranked North Andrew with a record of 5-3 versus St. Joe Christian with a record of 4-5.
And again, these two teams met earlier in the year. In week 2 is North Andrew's opening game. And North Andrew won 58-26. But again, it's important to remember that St. Joe Christian had a lot of trouble at the beginning of the season and has really climbed back and has really made a great run and is peaking just at the right time. And again, St. Joe Christian is led by Braden George with 1,344 yards and 26 touchdowns. But St. Joe Christian also is not afraid to pass. Ben Craven has been airing the ball more and more as the season has gone on. He's passed for 710 yards. But North Andrew's linebackers are really the strength of the defense, you could say. And St. Joe Christian really likes to pass short. So we predict that North Andrew is going to take away St. Joe Christian's really short passing game and force them to run. And then again, North Andrew's offense is led mostly in passing with Jacob Powelson and Caleb Patterson, and St. Joe Christian really is more of a run defense. They are a little bit sketchy as far as passing defense goes, so we expect that the North Andrew will win this one in a pretty close game.
Next match is number 7 ranked King City with a record of 6-2 versus Pattonsburg with a record of 5-5.
And these two teams met earlier in the year, and King City won 74-58, and really a shootout of a game. It was really pretty close up until the end. Both of these teams have pretty similar styles. They both really like to air the ball out. Colin Breckenridge is quarterback for King City. He already almost has 1,500 yards on the season, while Cole Dilley is the quarterback for Pattonsburg. He already almost has 2,500 yards passing on the season. But Pattonsburg has really had a lot of trouble in their secondary. They really haven't been able to stop many teams from getting big yards on them, and really that was their main reason that they lost earlier in the season. Really, as you look at film as the season comes on, they really haven't corrected that too much. So we expect King City to win by a fairly decent margin.
Next matchup is number 2 ranked Sacred Heart with a record of 8-0 versus number 6 ranked Greenfield with a record of 7-1.
And even though the records are pretty comparable, it's important to remember that Sacred Heart has scheduled much more tough non-conference games than Greenfield has. The two teams met in week 2, and Sacred Heart won by a score of 53-16. Greenfield struggles offensively. Really the way that they win games is really just gritting it out towards the end and having their defense stand up for them. Sacred Heart has a very diverse offense and really a great defense as well. Greenfield's offense is only solely in the air. They really struggle in the running game, but Sacred Heart really has what could be argued to be the state's best secondary, and they're really good at taking away the pass. And we think that they'll probably be able to take Greenfield's passing game away, which will force them to run, which is really not their strong suit. And again, we think the Sacred Heart's offense is really just going to be too potent since they have way too many skill players for Greenfield to cover. So we predict Sacred Heart to win this one.
Next matchups are the state semifinals with number 1 ranked Worth County with a record of 8-0, taking on number 8 ranked North Andrew with a record of 5-3.
Again, these two teams played earlier in the year, and Worth County won by a 56-6 score in halftime. But that game was at Worth County. This game, if everything goes as we said it have been, this game will be at North Andrew, which will give a slight advantage to the Cardinals. Worth County rushed for 276 yards just in that halftime game. North Andrew really struggled to stop the run. Tevin Cameron is really the big workhorse for the Tigers rushing. He's already rushed for 1,353 yards on the season and 31 touchdowns. Again, North Andrew's major offensive production comes from Jacob Powelson to Caleb Patterson passing, and they've teamed up for quite a few yards. But North Andrew really struggles to stop the run. They've gotten better as the season has gone on, but Worth County was really the only team so far that's really been able to hold North Andrew's offense in check, and we think that might continue as the game goes on.
With this state semifinal matchup, we have Worth County winning. Next up is number 7 ranked King City with a record of 6-2 versus number 2 ranked Sacred Heart with a record of 8-0.
Both of these two teams really rely heavily on the passing game. Colin Breckenridge leads Wildcats in passing, while Sacred Heart would probably be on the top 1 or 2 slots in state passing, but they don't report any of their stats to the 8-man Coaches Association. Sacred Heart has one of the best passing defenses in the state, while King City's passing defense has really been pretty sketchy at best as the season has gone on. The way that King City has won games has basically been in shootout fashion. They've just scored and hoped the other team would turn the ball over, because Colin Breckenridge, again, he hasn't passed for very many interceptions on the season. So he's really been pretty efficient, and that's really how they've grinded out the games. But again, they really haven't played a team that has a great secondary yet, and we think that whenever they meet up with Sacred Heart, the Sacred Heart is going to be able to at least kind of give them the Heisman on their passing game. And Cal Preps has Sacred Heart favored by 30 points. Again, that may be a little bit extreme, but we think it's pretty close. Sacred Heart's offense is just way too potent for King City to be able to handle, so we pick Sacred Heart to win this one.
State game, we have number 1 ranked Worth County with a record of 8-0 versus number 2 ranked Sacred Heart with a record of 8-0.
This is really going to be a pretty interesting game, because this is about as far as you can get as far as a conflict of styles go. Worth County rushes the ball and rushes, while Sacred Heart passes as much as they can. Again, Worth County is really big and strong pretty much all the way around, and Sacred Heart, other than on their lines, really doesn't have that great big huge running back that can really power through. They're more of short little guys that can juke in and out and get long yards. Again, as we saw throughout the year, Sacred Heart is probably the best in the state at preparing for teams, and really how Worth County is really rather predictable in what they do. Worth County really struggles to stop the passing game. Their secondary has been improving immensely as the season has gone on, but is definitely not probably where they're going to want it to be. And Sacred Heart is a great scouting team. Their linebackers are probably some of the best in the state. And really, since Worth County always runs, the linebackers are probably going to be able to read their ghost holes and really stifle their running game. And even though Cal Preps has Worth County winning this one. We think that Sacred Heart is probably going to take home state this year.
But I guess we'll see in Springfield on November 18th which team will come out with a victory.
Thanks for watching. This is NAC News 2017 Bracketology.